friendly reminder, if you still have questions, if you're still thinking about one, if you're still writing one, you can still bring those up. We have about 45 minutes left planned in this time, so we still, the rest of the time is up to you guys, what you want to ask. So we're trying to get through all these questions. We still have plenty up here, but we can use some more. This will be for House District 17. There are two competitors in this race here. This question for both of you. 25 states currently have medical cannabis laws. These protect patient rights to have safe access to all medical options their doctor recommends, and brings revenue for public education, public health, etc., and reduces prison and court costs. Where do you stand? House District 17.
I think this is an interesting and important question that our nation is currently facing. I don't know that I actually have a great answer for you. It's not one that I've truly studied or looked into it. I don't want to come here and just give you some, whatever I think sounds best. It's something I would like to research more. I have seen in multiple states that there are medical benefits. The story that I've read most about is there was a little girl that suffered debilitating seizures. She couldn't speak, she couldn't anything, and nothing helped through treatment. And finally, they actually found that pure concentrated THC oil grown from the hemp plant pretty much eliminated her seizures more than any medicine, therapy, surgery ever could. And so I do think it's an important conversation we need to have as a state. We do need to wash away the stigma that because something comes from the hemp plant, that it is necessarily bad. We need to engage in like, what are the benefits of it. But I also realize that, I don't know all the answers on this, so I will be very open to that conversation to figure out what the right solution is for Kansas and, what our constituents really want. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to preface my answer to this question with the fact that I think when we get a new team up in Topeka, we need to have a laser focus on our budget, because our budget problem is what's affecting every other issue that affects all of us in the state. So if I'm fortunate enough to get your vote and go to Topeka, number one, we're going to be focused on the budget and figuring out how to stabilize our revenue stream and so we can meet our obligations. Number two, public education. Once those are dealt with, all these other issues need to be addressed. On the issue of medical cannabis, I would, like Tom, I would like to learn more about it, visit with experts, and see how it can be implemented if possible. In the states where, you've got a lot of states with medical and recreational. Medical would obviously be the first step if we're going to go that route. There are consequences to its implementation. Some places you go, it seems there's a dispensary on every corner. I don't know that that's the best idea. But if it's properly regulated, you've got proper safeguards in place, I think there is definitely a place for it, medical usage. I would welcome input from the medical community. Our doctors in our hospitals are going to be the best experts on how it's properly regulated and dispensed. Thank you.
We have a question posed directly to the race in Senate District 21. So we'll allow you three to answer this question. Where specifically is the right balance between Second Amendment rights and public safety? Twitter goes to the audience. Okay. So, yeah.
I will say I support the Second Amendment, but I also appreciate local control. Western Kansas has a very different makeup than Johnson County. For one, I support our first responders, and I expect them to keep me safe when I'm out in public. And if you're going to carry, you have to be trained, and you have to have a license. I don't want a vigilante trying to save me, so anyone who's waving a gun when I'm at Target or Costco, I actually had one of my volunteers and supporters was walking with me, and she said the other day I was in Costco and someone was open carrying a gun. She said, "I'm calling Costco." Yes, I support the Second Amendment, and in your home you have the right to protect it, but Western Kansas and Johnson County are very different, and I support my police officers, and I expect them to protect me, and there you go.
Mr. Mayor, I thank whoever did this for this question. I support the Second Amendment with no buts. You have an absolute right to open a concealed carry. That's what the state says. I fought to make it happen. I actually, before the state passed that law in 2013, I organized something called Johnson County Open Carry. I went after each of the cities that was still permitting open carry. And I am personally responsible for the next step, changing the rule 1 year ahead of the state coming in and making my efforts move. Nevertheless, I'm firmly in favor of complete freedom for open and concealed carry. Moving on. Someone will save your life one day.
So, in addition to Michael being a champion for being able to walk around with a gun unlicensed, without a permit, no training, on college campuses, in your libraries, in your parks, in your schools, Greg Smith, the incumbent, the Brownback Republican incumbent, was also a champion for those laws. I believe firmly in responsible gun ownership. I think just in May, there was a Kansas high school graduation where a guy was carrying a gun and he shot himself, and shrapnel hit a woman in the crowd. And I don't know what kind of training he had or what license he had, if he had one. You don't have to in Kansas anymore, either of those. But I think if you're going to own a gun, it should be very similar to owning a car. You ought to prove that you can use it, and we ought to know, that you have one. And I also think it should be up to local governments and local entities like our universities and our cities to decide where they want to allow weapons in public places. You certainly have a right to protect your home, but also if our police officers, who are trust, like Dinah said, to protect me, if they're coming into a shooting situation, they don't know who the good guy with the gun is or the bad guy with the gun is. And also, there are statistics that show that you are more likely to die from a gun if you have one in your home. And so I think that's why it's also important that we make sure everyone is trained to own a gun. So I support the Second Amendment. It's there for a reason. But it also does come with responsibility. And I think we need to make sure that our laws reflect that. Thank you.
Senate District 10, this night you've been sitting there waiting so patiently to your last question. We'll give you a couple of questions just as a reward. We will also kind of go back to the other races, so we have enough questions at any time to be able to hear from the candidates some more. But in Senate District 10, Ms. Hiatt, specifically at you, in my Western Shawnee neighborhood, voters tend to vote Republican. I, as a resident Democrat, frequently voted and supported for GOP candidates. How do you get voters to vote for you or other Democrats?
Since I live in Western Shawnee, I very well know how many Republicans are out there. I think we've got to give our Republicans a choice as well. I think that there are a lot of Republican, conservative people out there who are also frustrated with what's going on in Topeka. What I know, too, about Western Shawnee is the growth rate out there. If any of you have traveled out there, the housing market has been booming tremendously in the last 2 years. We're seeing a new demographic out there of young families who are very, very focused on public education. They're moving to that area because of the good schools. Over and over again, when I'm talking to people at the doors or at meet and greets and house parties, people are telling me that they moved here from Baltimore, Maryland, or from someplace in California, and they did the research because Kansas has been known for their public education. So I really believe that regardless of what party, Democrat, Republican, the issues are very critical this election. We have to get the right people into Topeka to support our public schools and to make sure that we get a budget and tax policy that is fair for everyone and can manage to adequately and equitably pay for our public education system.
We still have time for some more questions. We'll stick with Senate 10 and Ms. Hiatt and ask her another question, a version of which we've kind of already heard, but we'll get her opinions on this. Do you support guns on college campuses and in schools? Would you support legislation to
I absolutely do not support guns on college campuses. I was at an event recently and had a mother come to me who said, please get into Topeka and get rid of that option that people can carry on college campuses. As Mr. Heley was saying, with any kind of a situation that becomes an active shooter situation and you have things going on, you don't know who the bad guy is with a gun and who the good guy is with a gun. And I've seen in many situations people not even use their gun because they did not want to pull it out and be the one gets shot because they thought somebody else thought they were the active shooter. It's beyond rational thought that we would actually have guns on our college campuses. I am pleased to have a police force and campus security to be able to take care of those things, but there's no reason for an 18 to 21-year-old to be carrying a gun to try to protect whatever, so I'm opposed to it.
We'll go back through a little bit more randomly. I won't go down my list. I'll try to select and get back to each race at least one at a time. We still have an opportunity for questions if you still want to bring those up. We'll go down to House District 17. So Tom Cox and Helen Stoll. This question for you. Voter registration at the DMV, part of the federal voter motor law versus current state law requiring proof of U.S. citizenship. What are your thoughts and what should be done?
Thanks, I'm glad this question came up. If you've been following the news recently, our Secretary of State, who's charged with what should be a very simple clerical task to get people registered to vote, has thrown the situation into chaos. I hear from so many people who don't know if they're registered, don't know how to figure it out. It's unconscionable that the job of getting people to register to vote has become such chaos, and it will affect this election. Many races in this area are decided by 100 votes or less. If you have these provisional ballots, we do not know if they will be counted in the election. He is deciding this election for us, and I'm passionate on the topic of voter registration. I find it strange in Kansas that we want to make it much easier for you to carry a weapon whenever, wherever you want to, then you have the right to vote.
I would echo some of those same sentiments. Our current Secretary of State seems to be the Secretary of State of voter suppression. It concerns me that their aim seems to be how can we make it as difficult as possible? How can we be unwilling to work with them? How can we provide bad systems in place? That needs to change because voting is our constitutional right. It is, I think, the single greatest right that we have next to free speech in this nation, and I want to preserve that as much as possible. I don't know that I fundamentally disagree with the idea of proof of citizenship. I mean, since you have to be a citizen to vote, but you can't implement that law without implementing a reasonable system to make sure that people can actually do that reasonably, which we don't have. You have to have the staff that can make sure that those 50,000 people that were in the unknown status because the scan of their passport wasn't clear enough or the document wasn't the long form of their birth certificate. If you don't have the staff and resources to ensure that you're accurately doing that are reaching out to these people directly and saying, hey, we had a problem, your registration didn't go through, here's what we need, then we can't have that law. We can't do things that are restricting citizens from legally being able to vote. And the fact that the federal government did come in and say, great, you can have that law for state elections, but you can't for federal elections, that violates our laws. We shouldn't have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of taxpayer money debating that. We should have said, okay, that's fair. How do we spend the weeks up till the election implementing changes to protect the voting rights of our citizens? Not spending all of that time fighting a legal battle so they have, what, three weeks, 4 weeks maybe after that to make sure that these people can now vote. So our right to vote is something that needs to be protected at every single angle. We need to work to make sure more people are voting, more people are registered, more people are educated, never less.
question is for both of you. I seem to be inundated with postcards from Topeka, not from local campaigns. Do you support limits on campaign spending?
Okay. Okay, as far as campaign finance reform, it's one of the first topics that I ever testified in front of the Senate committee back on in 2010. That particular topic had to do with judicial retention and campaign finance reform and how money was being spent. I think, of course, that there should be limits on how money is spent in campaigns. We should not be able to buy elections in America. People should have to work for them. We have to work to earn your trust. We have to represent you well. And I don't want somebody coming in there and buying my way into office. I don't, we have much stricter rules here in Kansas than you do in Missouri. If you've heard about some of the stuff that goes on there, they don't really have limits on donations. We have limits on donations here. And I think that that's one of the best ways to restrict spending. If you're talking about the postcards coming for the large PACs, I think that they should have to be more transparent. I think at a federal level that they need to overturn Citizens United.
First of all, I agree with Amber that Citizens United needs to be overturned. Corporations are not people. Yes, PACs donate money to campaigns. That is a fact of life, and I don't think that's going away. But I actually think that I think I could be in favor of actually raising the contribution limits for individuals to contribute or companies for that matter, to contribute to candidates, because that number has not changed in many years. $500 is the limit per election cycle for a House race, per person or per company or PAC. And having gone through campaigns, I know now how expensive they are. And, what we need is more individuals being willing to fund, to stand up and support candidates that they believe in with their dollars. We also need to get the dark money out of campaigns. Returning Citizens United would achieve that, or help to achieve that. Regarding postcards from Topeka, I urge everyone to read the fine print on those postcards that are going to be landing in your mailbox almost daily between now and August 2nd, and then again in November. If it comes from groups like Americans for Prosperity, the Kansas Policy Institute, the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, Americans for Freedom, or whatever it is, those groups, they play loose with the facts. So do your research, know who's supporting candidates with outside money, and be an informed voter.
We'll move on to House District 18. We have a couple of questions directly at Senate 21 and the State Board of Education. Actually, several questions for the State Board of Education here, so we will get to those. This question, though, will be for House District 18, Ms. Neighbor and Mr. Jenkins. CDC statistics indicate a 17.9% increase in developmental delays in the past 10 years in children. How do you recommend that we not only restore adequate funding, but increase monies to allow for appropriate classroom supports?
I'll go ahead and take that first. First of all, in special ed, our students, districts do receive federal funding. Many, many years ago, and I want to say it's been over 30, we had the federal government say that they would pay a portion, 40%, for special ed. The nice thing about that was they passed the law. The bad thing about that is they never signified or ratified the funding. So each year, it has to be funded. So there is not an ongoing source of funds. We have never reached that 40% mark. That would be a tremendous addition to our schools. Kids need to be tested when a parent comes in. Their needs need to be met. I know if we bring a student in from out of state and they have been on an IEP, we have 10 days to get them back in the same kind of classroom setting with an IEP. All students, all parents, and all teachers need to have the support and the funding to make sure that that happens. Because without that, kids can be undetected. Teachers have classrooms that when you have special needs students, it requires more support. You need the tools to work with, you need the staff to work with, and I think another portion of this is staff development too. Because a new teacher coming out of school may not have that experience when they have special ed students in their classes. We have to do a better job of making sure that they have mentors and to make sure they have the tools and the development to work with. Thank you.
I have personal involvement in this particular subject. I have 2 grandchildren with Asperger's, and that created a number of issues for my daughters when they were dealing with these children in the school system. So obviously it's an issue, it's becoming a larger issue all the time, kids with special needs. I think it's a very important consideration. I think we need to take a good hard look at it. But like so many of these problems, it's easy just to talk about it and kind of gloss over terms, but when you really get into the details, you have to take it apart and try to figure out how we actually deal with it. I think it's going to take a lot of discussion. I would support such a discussion, and I would like to go there.
There are 3 candidates present in Senate District 21. Here's a question directed to your race. Is reinstituting the previous school funding formula part of the short-term or long-term fix? Reinstituting the previous school funding formula. You can answer the order.
So is reinstating the previous funding formula, repeat the question.
Is reinstituting the previous school funding formula before the state of block grants part of, I guess, any kind of fix for education funding, short-term or long-term?
I think it's short-term. We have to sit down with all people who are involved in this process. That's teachers, it's administrators, it's your school board, it's business leaders. And they all have to come to the table. I am glad that we went back to the previous formula because the block grant, it was telling our school districts, do not grow. Johnson County is growing. Our schools are the economic drivers of our communities. And with the block grant, we were like, well, you know, if you get 200 more students, that's great, but we're not going to give you any more money. So yes, it is a good step to go back to the previous formula. It has not ever been fully funded, so we have to address that. But the solution is getting all people at the table deciding what is the cost of educating our students and preparing them for the 21st century marketplace. And that's going to include teachers, parents, school board, business leaders. We all have to come together, and that's how we will have a solution for funding our formula. And it goes back to our tax policy as well. We have to figure out how to get the revenue in and stop missing our revenue estimates every month. Well, 10 out of 12, I'll give you. Okay, we spend a lot of money when we win the World Series. But we all have to come to the table. What does it cost? How do we want our children prepared? And what do the businesses need?
Okay, my position is, I think I said it before, but I'll try to make it clearer now, is there is no formula that's going to make everybody happy. Anytime there's a pot of money and everybody has to get a piece of it, everyone's going to be fighting over it and saying, I want more. You know, I deserve more than you do. I'm not getting enough. That's just built into the system of centrally collecting the money and then having it divided up. So you have to go back, get away from the centralization, let every school district raise what they think they need, what their taxpayers are willing to pay. So now, the current formula of black grants, previous formula, neither one's right. We're going to be fighting over it either way. It's a continuous problem. By the way, if you wanted more details in my proposal, it's written down outside on the literature table.
Well, I don't think we need to be fighting about the future of our state and the future of our kids. I think it's a pretty obvious answer and a pretty obvious pathway forward. The only way that our state can move forward beyond Brownback and to a better future is through prioritizing our public schools. Like Dinah said, we never fully funded the school finance formula that worked for us, was working for us before Brownback. We had a plan before the recession to fully fund that school finance formula, which I think would have eliminated a lot of the funding that we're doing right now over school funding. But when Brownback took office, he kept cutting education. So I think we need to return to the pathway to fully fund that school finance formula, and then we can work on tweaks if we need to improve different areas, equalize in different areas. The Brownback Republican regime in Topeka has been so short-sighted on so many numbers of issues. We're thinking small when it comes to our taxes. People do not come to Kansas for a tax break. And they're not coming here for the beaches and the mountains. They're coming here for our public schools because it's a safe place to raise your family and a good place to live. That's why people come here, and that's what we need to prioritize. We need to prioritize investing in people. Investing in people. And so the first and foremost thing is public education, and we need to restore that school finance formula, fully fund it, and get Kansas moving forward. People should not, again, be thinking of Kansas as some backward state that they only see on the late night talk shows, being lampooned with jokes. It should be a place that people think of as the best schools in the nation once again, and a place that's innovative and forward-thinking. And it's going to take all of us to have that fight and vote out the Brownback Republicans on August 2nd and in November.
Thank you. We've got several questions directed specifically at the State Board of Education, right? So give those two candidates a chance to answer a couple of those now, since it's been a while since you've answered a question. We'll start with this one, and you can answer any order that you would like. What is the value of teacher professional development programs in Kansas, and do you value teacher licensure programs? So the value of teacher professional development programs and teacher licensure programs.
Yes, we need competent licensed professionals in every classroom. So how does that jive with welcoming the unlicensed into our classrooms? There is a change that has to be made in the way we bring people into our classrooms. Whatever it is that you want to advocate, we're not reaching about a quarter of our citizenry, a quarter of God's children, a quarter of our country, of our state. We're missing them. So what would you change? I know what I would change. I would have a system that said, can you really teach? I mean, can you teach? Because some of our graduates of colleges of education aren't very good. And there are people out there across our state who would be crackerjacks if we would welcome them. Now, what does it take to be a good teacher? I'm not a teacher of all subjects. I have no business teaching the language of Chinese I don't know, or Spanish, or Farsi, or Italian, but I know the language of mathematics. And I knew it pretty well before I got my master's degree in education. I started out as an engineer, and I did a lot of teaching, but the state said, hold on, Mr. Roberts, you're not qualified. But I've taught for years, you're not qualified. We started changing that, but it's hard. Change is hard. And one of the things I continually advocate is that our colleges of education have an important role to play in the preparation of our future special education. Principals, superintendents, our colleges of education are essential, but it's not essential to keep a lock on the secondary classroom door.
I am a strong proponent for teacher mentoring programs. We lost a huge number of young teachers this past year with less than 5 years of experience. All teachers are overworked. All teachers are overworked. And it's difficult for experienced teachers to find time throughout their day to mentor younger teachers coming into the field. So I would actually suggest that a program where teachers, experienced teachers, receive an incentive of time and or money to mentor young teachers to help them stay in the field. I am a strong proponent of teacher licensure. My program dealt with so many factors that are difficult for people to understand, how to specifics such as classroom management, parent conferencing, at-risk students, English language learners, student motivation. There are so many factors involved in a classroom, and nobody has fewer than 20 children anymore. I also had 2 internships, well supervised, to be sure that I was prepared for the rigor of being an educator. I just think it's a path. I think that teaching is a passion and not an avocation, and I'm a strong supporter of licensure and paid mentoring programs. Thank you.
Since there have been so many questions directed directly at the school board candidates, I'm going to ask you another question that has been posed to you. What is the role of the legislature and/or state board of education in determining what bathrooms students can use? And reading into this question, I believe it's directed specifically at the use of transgender student bathroom usages.
Well, I think there's been a lot of controversy, and I think that many people feel that there's some overreach with federal guidelines and mandates. I would suggest that the role of our state is to protect all students, and I believe that every school and every district should have a program to be sure students are safe, and there should be absolutely no discrimination for any reason. I think some of those boundaries have been blurred. Whether the federal government usurped the power, I think school boards, school districts, and schools, I would say, that there's a strong challenge. They need to protect all students from discrimination.
I would echo that. We decided in a unanimous 10-0 vote to basically say, thank you, good folks in Washington, for your concern about our transgender students and which bathroom they could use.